How much do you think Jayden Struble is worth? Is this really a big season for Arber Xhekaj? And can we stop saying 2C? How about going more in depth and trying to figure out what the future is like for the Montreal Canadiens instead of just trying to throw names at the wall and let them stick? It's July 9th. Time for another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey gang, Kosta here with another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. And you know what? I've been listening and reading to other people all week long, and it's really starting to get to me because what's going on now, we're in the middle of July. What's going on right now is posturing. There's nothing really happening. GMs are on vacation. They're taking a bit of a break. It's going to heat up in August. Right now, what do you get? You get interviews. You get regurgitation of the same shit year after year. You get hopes being made a little bit bigger. And you get a bunch of rhetoric. So let's just dive into it because it seems like people forget year after year that this time of year is all smoke and mirrors. And if you think about it, let's start with just learning how to talk GM, okay? And when I say learning about, talking GM, we're talking about this guy. Jeff Gorton, okay? He's not really the GM of the Montreal Canadiens. He's the director of hockey operations. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that he goes out and he signs players because that's Kent Hughes' job. He sits there and he directs traffic. That's Gorton's job. See, the thing about Jeff Gorton that a lot of people don't really realize is that when he rebuilt the Boston Bruins, he got to go from point A to point Z and get everything done, right? Then you look at going to the Rangers. He went to the Rangers, he started the rebuild, and then about 3 years in, the Dolans decided, you know what, screw this, we got to jump the gun, we got to go back to the old Glenn Sather ways, let's get some free agents, screw Gorton, he's out of here. He's out of a job, doesn't get to finish what he started. Then he gets hired in Montreal. And now he's 3 years into a rebuild, he's past that point of, you're getting your ass kicked out the door, because Jeff Molson is trusting him with his most prized possession, the Montreal Canadiens. And so far, he's seen that steady increase. And I talk about it with players. I talk about it with just about anything. It's a steady incline that goes upwards as far as developing everything. Players, the team, identity, the whole kit and caboodle. And so now, you're 3.5 years into this rebuild for Jeff Gorton. And what are you going to say? Yeah, you know what? We're done. Nope. Yeah, you know what? We're looking at a few different possibilities. Sure. And you look at some of the kids that they picked up through free agency and who they drafted, and they're going to sing their praises. Why? Because that's what administrations do. It's GM talk, for lack of a better term. Or if you want to go even worse, GM speak. Because basically what they do is they go and sing the praises of every move they made over the summer, and they try to convince you, the fan, that they're the best moves they've ever made in their life. Take case in point. They picked up Bolduc. And, for all intents and purposes, everybody is singing Zach Bolduc's praises, including Jeff Gorton, right? He's got a good ceiling. He's emerging as a power forward. Blah, 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 blah. That's all fine and dandy. The question is, though, when he puts on the bleu, blanc, rouge, will that translate depending on who he plays with? We don't know that. We don't know who he's going to play with. People are guessing line combinations. Nobody knows what Marty St. Louis is thinking. Sure, the first line is going to stay together, but what's going to happen with the second line or the third? Is Bolduc going to stay on the wing? Is he going to maybe be that number 2 center that we're looking for? Nobody knows. And we'll talk about that 2C crap a little bit later. But nobody knows. It's all rhetoric. So I'm not in the game of guessing what line is going to be what, right? Because until September and October roll around, we have no idea what the roster is going to look like. Until you get to the golf tournament, you're pretty much guessing. Do we even know if Kirby Dach's going to make the opening day roster? We don't know. He got injured midway through the season. The year before, he got injured early on and missed the whole year. Where is he as far as his rebound is concerned? Do the Canadiens want to push him forward? Those are the questions you should be asking the GM. Things that are tangible. Things that will give you an idea of what to look forward to. Or maybe changes that might be coming up the pipe. Okay? Don't think about Mike Matheson. People are asking him about, well, what's the situation with Mike Matheson? I can tell you what the situation is with Mike Matheson. Mike Matheson is in his last year under contract with the Canadiens. Okay? If they don't trade him before the preseason, he's going to be trade bait at the deadline, assuming that the team doesn't say keep him because we don't want to destroy the nucleus. That's it. Very simple. There's no two ways about it. Okay, Mike Matheson is a good piece. A team that looks at their roster and turns around and says, you know what, we need a defenseman. Let's call the Canadiens, see if Matheson's available. It's on the other teams. The Canadiens can't shop him at this point. He's got 1 year left. We know what Mike Matheson is. Every team in the league does. So if they need him, they'll call. We won't call them, right? Kent Hughes is not going to be on the phone calling every team going, hey, you want Mike Matheson? No, bye. Hey, you want Mike Matheson? No, bye. And this is something that, Kent Hughes probably spoke to Mike Matheson about when they met earlier this summer. Mike, I need to make some changes. I may very well look to get you another home. What's Matheson going to say? He knows the business. He's been in the league long enough. All right, Kent, thanks for the heads up. Shake hands. See ya. Now, Matheson, it's going to be a big season. He's got to perform well. He didn't have a great year last year, admittedly. So what's the GM going to say? He's not going to say he's crap. He's going to say, you know what? Yeah, he's available. So other teams can call. Right? And the same holds true with, whatever moves they're going to make. You can throw whatever names you want at Jeff Gorton. Okay? Talk about the development camp. How did Tyler Thorpe look? Tyler Thorpe looked great. How did LJ Mooney look? He surprised us very much. He's a small guy with a lot of pep. It's all things we've heard before, right? The development camp, for all intents and purposes, is what you have guys that are at the same level playing. If you were to take that development camp and say, sprinkle in a couple of veterans here and there and see how things go, well, maybe, just maybe, those players might look a little bit different. If Mooney gets plastered into the boards by somebody like, say, an Arber Xhekaj, which won't happen at development camp, well, you don't really get to see the hockey that these guys are capable of playing. It's 4-on-4. It's not even 5-on-5. So, yeah, Thorpe's going to look good. Yes, Michael Hage is going to dominate. Yes, LJ Mooney's looking good. Yes, he got an invite to the U.S. junior camp. Rightfully so, because he's played 2 years in the development camp, in the national team development program. That's where they poach their players from. That in the NCAA. But first preferential treatment goes to the U.S. National Development Program. So are we surprised? No. So let's stop trying to make things bigger than they are, okay? It's a natural ascension to get an invite to the junior team camp. It doesn't mean he's going to make it, but if he continues the way he showed at development camp, playing against kids his own age and his own level, then yes, he's going to be there. Thorpe looked good in last year's development camp, looked good in this year's development camp. Does that mean he's going to make the open-day roster? Nope. He's going to be in the AHL. Woo, big surprise. And Michael Hage is going back to Michigan. We all know that. And his development's been great. He's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten a lot more confident with the puck. Those are all things, again, on that development curve that we want. Right? But let's not turn around and say, hey, look at this. Look at me. It's GM talk. All right? So get away from the GM talk. Look at things that are tangible, things that are important, things that are going to happen, right, in order to move forward with this team. It's great to dream, but at the end of the day, you listen to the GM talk, and everything that he says could apply to any player on the Montreal Canadiens, okay? Bolduc, great. Could apply to any of the draft picks. Could apply to, I can't even remember who else they picked up, but you get what I mean, right? It's insert name here every year. So let's not get too excited about it. Are the Canadiens looking for more? If you say no, you're full of shit. Every GM is looking for more in the offseason. All right? And right now, they're just trying to pick the bones of other teams. And I'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. But let's talk a little bit more about guys that are on the roster or might not be on the roster. And that is Jayden Struble and Arber Xhekaj. I mean, when you take a look at these guys, right? Here's Jayden Struble in arbitration right now. Last season, made $867,500, okay? Playing a limited role with the Canadiens. Now, you should be counting those lucky stars that he gets sent down to the AHL more often because, after all, you get paid NHL money at the NHL level, and he stayed up in the press box for a long period of time. But what did he really bring to the table? He took a step back a little bit from the year before where he was a lot more, I won't say dominant, but impressive. Okay? He got out there. He got into fights. He was a lot more aggressive offensively. And I think this year, given the fact that he's being pushed to play a little bit more of a defensive style of game, that kind of hurt him a little bit and put him in limbo as far as this game is concerned. And that can apply to Xhekaj too, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But when you look at Struble and you say to yourself, okay, the guy's going to arbitration, he wants a pay raise. The Canadiens qualified him, which means they gave him 10% and that's it. Okay? But when you look at Jayden Struble as a whole, how much is he really worth? Well, here's the opposite side of that equation, and that is Arber Xhekaj. Arber Xhekaj is in the second year of a 2-year, $1.3 million contract, right? So it's a big season for him, right? He has to prove his worth, and he has to prove that he's worth more next season to the Canadiens, because after this contract, he's going to be RFA again because the Canadiens bridged him. Now, that being said, getting back to Struble, where is his value? He doesn't drop the mitts. He didn't put up a lot of points last year. Sure, he throws a couple of hits here and there, but defensively, he struggled. And, it's no fault of his own because, when you're playing next to guys like Matheson, who is giving up the puck often, or Lane Hutson, who is a rookie, expected to make mistakes. When you play side by side sometimes and you end up on the ice together, that's going to happen, right? Or you're playing on a pairing with Arber Xhekaj, and, the two of you are just being overwhelmed because you don't have that defensive acumen that you need to be successful in the National Hockey League. Right? You're chasing players as opposed to letting the players come to you and keeping a good gap. Those type of things that they're trying to be taught right now. And the Canadiens will teach them. The question is, are these guys willing to take the time to learn? Now, we know that Struble has the capacity and the skill set to be a very good two-way defenseman. He can skate the puck up the ice. He can throw the body. He can drop the mitts. It's just a question of whether or not he can be good in his own zone, because last year, admittedly, he made a lot of bad mistakes. Giving the puck up along the boards, throwing pucks out into the slot, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that the Canadiens need to get out of his game. And the same holds true for Arber Xhekaj. Arber Xhekaj is a key piece for the Montreal Canadiens. All right. Last season, everybody was bitching and complaining at me because I kept on saying they can't put Arber Xhekaj in the lineup. They can't put Arber Xhekaj in the lineup. The whole reason I was saying that is because Arber Xhekaj was playing bad hockey. Not because he has no value to the team. It's not because we don't need his physicality and his larger than usual mitts to be able to knock a guy on his ass when called upon. Right? But we also need a guy who can contribute offensively. He only had 6 points last year. The year previous, he had a little bit more. But we also need a guy who is a lot more responsible in his own zone. I know the Canadiens play man-to-man defense. We talk about it all the time. In fact, I did a show about it. And the thing about that is there has to be a point in time, even at man-to-man, where you release a player. And that means if a forward takes the puck back to the blue line, you're not going to chase him from the corner up to the blue line as a defenseman. You need to release that player. He's not going to be a threat from the blue line, okay? He may take a shot long distance, but at that point, you're counting on your goaltender to stop that puck 99% of the time. So you got to know when to pick your spots. You got to be good at angling the puck. You got to be good at pinning guys to the board, separating man from puck. And you got to be good at using your stick as a tool when you're playing defensive hockey. And those are the things that Arber Xhekaj is missing from his game. He has his moments. But, he's an undrafted guy that came in from Costco, of all places, right? We know the story. So I want to see the guy succeed. I want to see the guy play with his brother. But at the end of the day, the idea that Arber Xhekaj needs to get better defensively is not me saying I don't want him on the Montreal Canadiens. It's kind of me saying, you know what, guys? Arber Xhekaj needs to be better. And that's the God honest truth. Lane Hutson needs to be better in his own zone. That's also the truth. But given the numbers that he produces offensively, it's yin and yang, right? So we accept it a little bit more. So if you're going to be a player like a Struble or an Arber Xhekaj, if you don't contribute offensively from time to time and you play a bad defensive game, what exactly is your value to the hockey team? In Xhekaj's case, it's this. In Struble's case, I think the jury's out. So instead of sitting here and saying, how much, what do we do? What do we do? Let's talk about what he's worth. Is he worth $1.3 million? I don't think so. And neither do the Canadiens, which is the reason why they qualified him. But at the same time, him going to arbitration, which was his right, means that he thinks he's worth a little bit more than what the Canadiens are offering him. Now, to me, because of the fact that he hasn't brought anything really tangible to the table as far as his play is concerned, he's not worth more than Arber Xhekaj. So if he's asking for $2 million, the Canadiens are going to offer him 1.2, and that's the max I would go with Struble. If he doesn't want 1.2, salut la visite. I move on to the next guy because there's plenty of guys back there. And we all know that, right? The Canadiens have all kinds of depth defensively. So Struble's playing right now from a point of weakness. So if the Canadiens give him that $1.2 million salary for a couple of years, then I'm fine with that. If they give him more, it's a mistake. But knowing Kent Hughes and the way he's treated contracts with the Canadiens, I think he's going to do just fine. And I think he's going to stay within that $1.2 million range for Jayden Struble. Whether or not the player accepts it, completely different story. If he doesn't accept it after arbitration, then he becomes a UFA. And then you're playing with fire when it comes to your career. And the thing about arbitration, as we all know, teams go in there, and instead of praising their players for what they can do, they sit there and they bash them into oblivion, telling everybody and the arbitrator what they cannot do. It could be the beginning of the end of a relationship, or it could just be a ho-hum, this is business, let me wipe it off, and just keep moving forward. Remains to be seen. We'll see what happens after his arbitration hearing. Now, Marco D'Amico kind of came back from California the other day with a dump of information, right? Of course, Marco D'Amico, we all know, he's a regular now on the Sean Starr Show for some reason, and he writes for RG Media, along with my friend Jimmy Murphy. So now, before he came back, I actually sent in a question to Jimmy Murphy on the Sick Podcast, the Eye Test, with him and Pierre Maguire. And that question was, while I do this the other way around. D'Amico came back from California, and he said he had a news dump. The word around the league is unanimous. The Habs are far from done. We already know that. Now, moving on to the next slide, he mentions Evgeny Kuznetsov. When it comes to Kuznetsov, I want to be clear. That being said, the Canadiens are leaving no stone unturned. They have a plan A, B, C, and D. Somehow that's funny because that same A, B, C, and D plan came up at Tony Marinaro's show the other day. But I digress. And, he goes on to talk about, it's not clear what the Canadiens are going to do with Joe Veleno because he's been mentioned. But at the same time, Kuznetsov, they absolutely need a left-handed center since they lost Dvorak. So before he came out, and this was on July the 7th, I actually sent in a question to Maguire and Murphy saying, the KHL is not the NHL, but, given the lack of options for a second-line center, would the Canadiens be crazy to offer a 2 or 3 year contract to Evgeny Kuznetsov, or maybe a PTO? Both of them shot it down, politely, of course. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, right, Evgeny Kuznetsov had 32 points in 36 games in the KHL last season, playing with who? Ivan Demidov. And that's where my thinking came in, as maybe he's an option at 2C. But they made something very clear to me, and I agreed with it when they brought it up, and that is that Kuznetsov is a defensive liability. His best days are behind him. His days from being with the Washington Capitals and being dominant in the National Hockey League, they're done. He's an older player, still has skill, might have value on another team, but for the Canadiens and where the direction they're going, he's not exactly a fit as a second-line center, right? Because no matter who you put there, whether it's Demidov-Laine, Demidov-Newhook, there's no real defensive conscience on that line. And we've seen that with other lines where there has to be at least one, right? No matter what game the Canadiens have played, no matter what the second line looked like, there was always one person on that line who was a defensive conscience on that line. That wouldn't be the case if Kuznetsov was a second line center. So in thinking about it long term, I kind of agreed with them where, you know what? Despite the fact that Kuznetsov in the past has been very good, and the KHL certainly isn't at the same caliber as the National Hockey League. I mean, suffice it to say that while Kuznetsov may be an offensive catalyst for Demidov because they played together all year last year, I don't think he's the right fit for the Montreal Canadiens, right? I am getting to it because I do have a couple of players in mind that are currently available that I think might actually be good fits for Montreal. Now, one of the hot topics, everybody's talking about it, and that is the acquisition of Jordan Kyrou, right? Everybody's talking about, how the Canadiens need to go out and get Kyrou. Kyrou had 70 points last season in 82 games. Kyrou is the answer on the right wing, to replace insert name here, Patrick Laine, for example, right? But what people don't factor in is that the Canadiens right now are in a little bit of a salary restraint. They want to get rid of the Carey Price's contract so that they can have a little bit more flexibility when the cap's concerned. That's $10 million. They're already about $2.5 to $3 million over the cap. So that will leave $7 million for them to play with. Kyrou is already at $8.1 million, which means they would have to get rid of another contract in order to obtain him. So now, let's think for a minute. Okay, the Montreal Canadiens take Carey Price's contract and they send it over to the San Jose Sharks for a bucket of pucks and a hockey stick, just so they can get the $10 million off the cap and allow the Sharks to get to the salary cap floor. That idea can work if it happens. But in the case that it does, what do you do in order to get Kyrou into your lineup? You've got the cap space, right? And you're going to trade somebody away. Now, people I've talked to have told me that the Canadiens tried to get Kyrou prior to his no trade kicking in and offered Patrick Laine along with Kirby Dach and a couple of draft picks. At what level, they didn't really say, for Kyrou. On the surface, that's a whole other trade the Montreal Canadiens are trying to make to try to get rid of players. It's too much to give for Jordan Kyrou. And it would put the St. Louis Blues in a really precarious position for their own salary cap. You can't get any retention because at $9.2 million, what are you going to do with Laine's contract? You would have to retain a little bit of it in order to accommodate the Blues. So, as an example, you send him over and you absorb $3.2 million of his contract, about 30%, right? So this means that you're taking on the 8.1 of Kyrou and retaining 3.2 of Laine's contract. Okay. Plus, if you were to give up on Kirby Dach, then you would be taking another couple $1 million off your cap. It would even out at the end of the day, right? But would the St. Louis Blues do that? No. And so that was why nothing really happened as far as that traction was concerned. It was too much, right? The Blues aren't actively looking to get rid of Kyrou. As I mentioned, 70 points is nothing to scoff at. The kid's making $8.1 million. Now, if the Blues are looking to make other moves in order to make the team better, obviously you have to give up something good to get something good back. We talk about that all the time. So Kyrou is probably the piece that they looked at to get rid of. You're not looking to get rid of somebody like Robert Thomas. There's other players in that lineup you're not going to get rid of because they are cornerstones of your lineup. Is Kyrou that? Maybe. If nothing happens, the St. Louis Blues are still a good hockey team with Kyrou in the lineup. But the question is, one, would Kyrou agree to come to Montreal? People are saying yes, he's agreeing to waive his no trade clause. I find that hard to believe. But at the same time, maybe he likes what's going on in Montreal. Maybe he sees that upward trajectory and he thinks, it'd be interesting to go play for the Habs and see how that works out. But again, it has to be a good deal for the St. Louis Blues. Their GM is no idiot. Right? Doug Armstrong's been doing this a long time. He's a smart man. So he's going to try to milk it for something else. Now, the question is, let's say you look at it, right? Let's say you sweeten the pot a little bit. You turn around and you say, okay, I'll trade you Laine and Matheson plus a pick for Kyrou. There's something as a Blues general manager I would look at because you're getting a forward to replace a forward. You're getting a solid defenseman who's on an expiring contract, and you're getting a draft pick or two, let's say. It'd be interesting to see what would happen, right? And how the St. Louis Blues would respond. We don't know that was offered. We don't know that it wasn't, but we're spitballing here. And you still retain $3.2 million, right? So now you've gotten rid of Matheson's contract. You've gotten rid of Price's because you sent it to San Jose, and you pretty much swapped Kyrou for Laine, give or take a couple $1 million. Canadiens are in a good spot as far as the salary cap. St. Louis Blues haven't really changed their position as far as the salary cap's concerned, and they've got a new defenseman in their lineup. It could be an interesting thought process. But at the end of the day, can the Canadiens land Jordan Kyrou? As I said, there's no certainties in life. General managers talk deals all the time. What deal do you think would break that gap and say, get the St. Louis Blues to say, okay, let's do it. I'm sending you Kyrou. Send me your players. What do you think the deal would be? Put it in the comments. Let me know, because I'm open to all suggestions, right? And you're talking about, you want talking points, right? Let's see what you guys think. You know what I'm thinking. I'm not right. I'm not wrong. It's my opinion, right? It's what I'm thinking. Just like the Kuznetsov was my thought process. Okay, somebody else brought up an opinion. You know what? They're right. Didn't mean I was right because I brought up Kuznetsov, and I didn't sit here and turn around and bash Murph and McGuire. Nope. I listened to what they said, and you know what? It made total sense. So send me your comments. I promise I won't knock them down, and I will comment on them, or quite frankly, I could bring them up on next week's show. You never know. Now, finally, let's stop saying the Canadiens need a 2C. All right? Let's call it like it is. The Canadiens have needed a second-line center for the last 20 years. Of course, they needed a first-line center too, but that goes beyond saying. But they don't have a second-line center. They haven't had a second-line center for the better part of 2 decades. So let's stop being so, vague when we say they need a 2C. What kind of 2C do they need? Do they need an offensive 2C? Do they need a defensive 2C? Now, I brought up Kuznetsov saying that he's a defensive liability. So do they need a second-line center who has a defensive conscience? Or do they need a second-line center who is exclusive to winning faceoff? They do need a left-handed center. They've admitted to that. Without Dvorak, just like Marco D'Amico said, they need a center that's left-handed to take faceoffs from the opposite side of the ice from their strong side. So who are those guys going to be? Well, we've talked about it, and there's a couple of names that are still available RFAs that, maybe the Canadiens might think about sending out an offer sheet for, right? And as I look through the list, it's only a couple of them, right? And when we look at it, let's start off with Ryan McLeod of the Buffalo Sabres, all right? Played 4 seasons with Edmonton. He's put up good points. Last year, 52 points in 79 games, 53, in 79 games. That's not too shabby for somebody who would be your second-line center, right? And he was a plus 13, which means he has a defensive conscience. Now, face-off-wise, he hovers around 48%. It's a little low for my liking, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. So McLeod, putting him to an offer sheet would be a smart move by the Canadiens, right? But here's the thing. Are there any guarantees that, the Buffalo Sabres won't match? Because they are a young team. If the Canadiens throw mad money at them, then, they may very well say, you know what? No, we're not going to match. So it's an option for Montreal in a market that wasn't really thick. It's a good option for Montreal. The guy's a former second-round pick, 40th overall. It's a good thought. But then I kept digging and I came up with another name. One that is a little bit more familiar, and one that we know comes from a certain pedigree, right? When it comes to the way they play and how they were brought up. Now, if we're going to have the Florian and Arber Xhekaj possibly playing for the Canadiens at the same time, then not the Suzuki brothers. Ryan Suzuki has only seen 2 NHL games in the last 4 seasons. 2 games. Hasn't gotten a point, but he's only seen 2 games. Last season in the American Hockey League, he had 59 points in 69 games. That's pretty good, right? When you think about it. And, when you look at he's been developing year after year after year, and he's that type of kid where, you know what? Older brother's on the team. Older brother learned how to play hockey the same way. He's a center as well, a left-handed center. He's got speed. He's got an offensive acumen. He's a former first-round pick, which we know Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton look at. Could be another first-round pick you add to the Montreal Canadiens. Think about that for a minute. What are the possibilities? And you're not going to get him very expensive because, after all, he's been languishing in the American Hockey League. If the Carolina Hurricanes don't have any intention to bring him up, then maybe now's the time to strike while the iron's hot. All right? We know the Hurricanes made a mistake with Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Pilfering Ryan Suzuki would be poetic justice as far as that battle between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Canadiens are concerned. And this dates back before Kotkaniemi. It dates back before the whole Sebastian Aho offers sheet. It dates back to when Justin Williams put his stick into Saku Koivu's eye and dashed the Canadiens' hope for a Stanley Cup, while the Hurricanes beat Montreal in that series and ended up going to the Cup final and winning, right? That's how far back that particular part of the rivalry goes. So think about it for a minute. Ryan Suzuki, the second line center to brother Nick Suzuki. What do you think? I mean, I'm always open, right? I'm never one to say, no, I'm absolutely wrong, and you're absolutely wrong, and I'm absolutely right. We're all just posturing here, right? And then we'll high-five each other when the guys like Kent Hughes go and say what they have to say and do what they have to do. It's an interesting thought process, right? Tell me what you think. Now, hopefully there's some news next week, because this week was rather a lot of a snooze fest, right? So hopefully next week is a little bit busier. I don't think it will be, because with the construction holidays coming up, it's not going to be anything to look at, right, when it comes to hockey news. But hopefully, and I mean hopefully, we see the Struble situation come to a head. We found out a little bit more about Jordan Kyrou, and maybe, just maybe, an offer sheet. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Good night, Habs. We'll see you next week.